There's a real chance that 2026 will be the year Formula One stops feeling like Formula One. Not because of politics, not even because of money, but because of engineering decisions dressed up as progress. The FIA keeps calling it the start of a light green and competitive era. Sounds noble, right? But scratch beneath the PR gloss and you'll find something darker. A rulebook that's slowly draining the sport's heart out through spreadsheets and algorithms. They're promising lighter chassis, sustainable fuels, cleaner powertrains, and closer racing, all the marketing buzzwords the sponsors love. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Behind the curtain, that same pursuit of efficiency is transforming the world's fastest sport into a lab experiment. The kind of racing born from raw instinct and noise and chaos is being replaced by predictive modeling and energy equations. Drivers who've tested the early concepts already hate how it feels. Max Verstappen warned about power conservation, turning racing into a management exercise. Charles Leclerc described the simulator runs as not enjoyable, and you can hear the disbelief in his voice, like he's testing a video game prototype that forgot to include the fun part. It's all happening under the banner of sustainability, the word every global sport now hides behind. But F1's genius was never about moral purity. It was about mechanical excess, barely controlled by human skill. By chasing public approval, the FIA is now building cars that sound, drive, and even fail differently. Less noise, more sensors. Less pressure on tires, more pressure on laptops. What's coming in 2026 isn't evolution. It's identity surgery, the kind that leaves scars. For the first time in decades, drivers are openly saying they don't recognize what's being handed to them. Fans feel it too, even if they can't put it into words yet. Race is slowly losing that visceral tone, that sensory violence that separates F1 from every other series with the steering wheel. So let's strip away the corporate slogans and look at how this new era is actually being built. Piece by piece, the FIA is dismantling what made F1 electric long before any battery pack could. And it starts with the very thing that defines racing's pulse, the engine. You've probably heard the headline figure by now. From 2026 onwards, Formula One engines will run on a roughly 50-50 split between internal combustion and electric power. On paper, that sounds balanced. In reality, it's a Frankenstein compromise that weakens both sides. The combustion engine, currently the main source of that visceral bite, drops from around 550 kilowatts to 400. That's effectively chopping a quarter of its power. Meanwhile, the MGU-K system, the electric recovery motor, jumps from 120 kilowatts to 350. Half the car's thrust will now come from silence, half from a tiny V6 trying to shout through its pillow. The FIA sold this as simplification. They've removed the MGU-H, the part that recovered energy from exhaust heat. But here's the plot twist. It wasn't the problem child they claim. It was F1's most sophisticated bit of hybrid tech, a system so efficient it turned wasted heat into acceleration. Without it, these new cars actually lose an entire layer of energy recovery. Less efficient, more wasteful, dressed up as green, call it what it is, regression. In practice, it means the moment that electric car fails, the driver's race is over. You won't just limp home with a slight loss of pace, you'll lose half your total output instantly. Think back to when Daniel Ricciardo somehow won Monaco with a failing MGU-K system years ago. Under 2026 rules, he wouldn't even have made it out of the tunnel. Every engine failure used to create a storyline, a heroic drive home, a mechanical gamble, a fight between man and machine. Now one flicker in a hybrid inverter turns a race car into a rolling chicane. Fans came for tension, not technical error codes. Then there's the sound, or what's left of it. The old V10s screamed pure adrenaline. The current V6s already lost that edge, muffled by turbos. Cut that engine's power in half, add more electric silence, and you're listening to background noise. Formula One's emotional frequency literally gets turned down. Those moments when you felt an overtake through your chest? Gone. And here's the hidden cost of all this so-called progress: depth of competition. The last time F1 changed engine philosophy this radically was 2014. Remember who dominated that decade? Mercedes, thanks to one technical head start that nobody could touch for years. These new rules are setting the stage for another monopoly. Whichever manufacturer nails the hybrid balancing act first keeps the rest of the grid in a headlock. The FIA will call it innovation. Teams will call it financial suicide. Because developing a brand new power system while staying inside a cost cap is like building a rocket with spare parts from a taxi garage. Manufacturers will burn hundreds of millions analyzing failure patterns, integration scripts, and cooling architecture before even finishing a race distance. And when the racing finally starts, what you'll get isn't competitive chaos. It's a technology war camouflaged as sport. A high-cost science fair where a handful of brands write the results months in advance. They can pretend it's still about drivers and daring overtakes, but when half your performance comes from software integration, the thrill lives and dies in the battery logs. That's the irony. This drive for equality and sustainability will make F1 slower, quieter, and more unequal. It's not greener, it's grayer. Closer racing might exist in the graphics, but on track, the margin for error and excitement gets killed by design limits and powertrain babysitting. At this point, you realize the engine revolution isn't reviving the sport's future. It's rewiring its heart to beat like a corporate product. And if the engine dulls that heartbeat, wait until you see what the aerodynamic systems are about to do to the sport's rhythm. Here's where things move from worrying to bizarre. The FIA's next bright idea is to turn every F1 car into a shape-shifting machine. They call it active aerodynamics. In normal language, it means the front and rear wings will literally morph mid-lap. 2 modes, X mode for corners, Z mode for straights. High downforce when you turn in, low drag when you floor it. It's clever, yes, but it's also deeply artificial. Drivers used to balance that trade-off themselves. How much grip you carry into a bend, how much top speed risk you take. Now software does it for you. The car senses position, speed and angle, then automatically adjusts airflow. The driver taps a button or two, but most of the decision-making happens in code. The line between skill and simulation blurs fast. For years, we've complained that DRS made overtakes too easy. That once per lap button turned bravery into geometry. But this takes it further. You aren't mastering a beast anymore, you're managing a transformer. And when every car morphs the same way, racing style gets homogenized. Bravery gets replaced by timing, and timing gets automated. You can feel why veterans hate it. The car is constantly breathing and twitching underneath them. Not because of track forces, but because systems are swapping aerodynamic states like they're scrolling a menu. It's divorced from instinct. You can't sense load changes through your fingertips if the computer's smoothing them out every half second. Then comes the new overtaking gimmick. What replaces DRS? It's called the manual override system, but don't let that name fool you. It's a glorified cheat code designed to hide the power unit's weakness. Remember how I said the electric side of these hybrids runs out of juice on the straights? That's a problem because it strangles top speed just when cars should be attacking. The FIA's patch was to let drivers temporarily bypass the normal energy limit when they're within striking distance of the car ahead. Hit the toggle, get a burst of full electric power, and lunge. Sounds tactical, but it's camouflage. You're fixing a flaw by institutionalizing it. Instead of building efficient acceleration, they've built a permission slip to break their own efficiency rules. And the crazy part? The FIA actually bragged about this in presentations, pitching it as strategic racing. Translation: we broke physics, so now we're turning it into theater. Remember when you could watch a driver plan and overtake 2 laps in advance, bait the opponent into defending too early, then commit on pure momentum? That's dying. Under this new system, a pass becomes a statistics problem. Do I use my override now or save it for later? It's no longer about precision and nerve, it's about predictive modeling under battery constraints. Even the aerodynamics targets quietly collapsed. The FIA promised a 30% downforce reduction to make cars less turbulent, but real testing showed chaos. They couldn't make the numbers work. Too little downforce, the car snaps. Too much, they overheat energy harvesters. So they quietly rolled the target back to 15%. Barely mentioned it. You don't sneak out revisions like that unless the concept's imploding in practice. And that's the real story. Active Aero isn't being introduced as innovation. It's being used as scaffolding, propping up a design that doesn't flow naturally. The hybrid system limits top-end performance, so Aero has to bail it out. That's not progress. That's engineering damage control packaged as spectacle. You can draw a straight line between these decisions and Formula E. In that series, drivers spend half the race managing energy deployment. When to attack, when to coast, when to fake a lunge just to make the opponent waste charge. It's smart, sure, but it's not what F1 was built on. You don't call the fastest drivers in the world to babysit batteries and switch aero maps. And that's the irony. The FIA keeps preaching about bringing driver skill back to the center, yet every rule they write automates another piece of it. Active Aero will manipulate airflow better than any human could. Power deploy systems will plan overtakes more efficiently than any instinct could. Add both together, and the driver becomes more like an operator overseeing someone else's genius. It's no coincidence that some engineers are whispering about simulator fatigue. The human brain can only manage so many toggles while pulling 5Gs through Eau Rouge. You stop racing and start multitasking, and that right there is where innovative design turns into cognitive overload. The beauty of F1 was always in that fragile edge, the human alone against mechanical violence. The FIA is replacing that battle with digital babysitting. If engines weakened the heartbeat of Formula 1, then active aero destroys its rhythm. But what's worse is how it changes the rhythm inside the cockpit itself. Let's talk about the people actually stuck driving these science projects. Every simulator test of the 2026 prototypes tells the same story: brain overload. Verstappen called it not racing anymore. Leclerc said the car was very, very different and not enjoyable. Sainz described it as mentally exhausting. When elite drivers, guys who thrive on precision chaos, say the car feels like homework, that's not adaptation, that's alienation. Here's why. The hybrid systems are harvesting 4 times more energy per lap than before, jumping from roughly 2 megajoules to over 8. That means every braking zone becomes a mathematical event. Tap the brakes too early, you lose lap time. Brake too late, you don't collect enough charge for the straight. Suddenly, driving lines aren't dictated by grip or bravery, but by charge graphs and recovery efficiency. Imagine learning to unlearn the instincts that made you a world champion. Drivers spend years perfecting how to trail brake, when to downshift, how to keep weight balanced through corners. Now they're told, brake earlier in mid-corner to recharge more effectively. It feels wrong because it is wrong. You're nursing kinetic recovery systems instead of attacking rivals. The knock-on effect is psychological. F1 used to reward aggression, send it, risk it, win big. Under 2026 logic, aggression is waste. Overtake attempts burn precious energy. Defensive driving burns it too. A smarter driver is one who shadows for 40 laps and waits for the algorithms to align. That's not racing, that's energy accounting at 300 kilometers per hour. Even the rhythm of circuits changes. Corners like Eau Rouge or Copse, once about commitment, now become charge opportunities. You'll hear engines revving in low gears mid-corner, not to accelerate, but to regenerate electricity. Picture Monaco filled with cars revving just to charge batteries. It's absurd. The FIA believes this creates a deeper strategic layer. Maybe it does, on spreadsheets. But on track, it dilutes identity. The driver becomes an analyst constantly calculating whether their brake maps align with recovery targets. They're turning apex hunters into software engineers with steering wheels. Max wasn't exaggerating when he said the prototypes couldn't maintain top speed in simulator tests. He literally had to downshift while flat out to keep power alive. That's mechanical sacrilege. It's the kind of thing that would destroy a gearbox in the real world. Yet, this is the logic shaping the new generation. Cars designed to work best when you back off. That shift also breaks muscle memory. Modern F1 driving is reflexive. Tiny steering corrections at 320 kilometers per hour, tuned by years of intuition. Throw energy management layers on top and every reflex is questioned. Did you hit that corner perfectly? Maybe. Did you harvest enough? Who knows? There's no satisfaction, no flow, only metrics. Some engineers insist it'll all balance out once the system's mature. Maybe. But history says otherwise. Back in 2014, early hybrid cars were so complex that drivers couldn't even finish radio conversations mid-lap. They were too busy juggling modes. We fixed it by simplifying. Now we're doubling complexity again. You can already see its toll in testing feedback. Sainz mentioned occupying so much brain space. That line stuck with me, because when a driver's cognitive load skyrockets, their instinct, the very thing that defines great racers, shrinks. The purer the sports technology gets, the more it strangles its human element. And that's the cruel twist. The FIA's idea of progress keeps moving control away from the person behind the wheel, the one we tune in for. Energy management over judgment, battery graphs over gut feel. It all looks great on sustainability reports, but sounds like the death of character. Here's what it really comes down to. F1 should be fought on nerve, talent, and risk, not on charge percentages. Turning every race into a mathematical puzzle might satisfy engineers, but it loses the drama that built global obsession. At this point, the drivers aren't just competitors, they're test pilots for eco-PR. And when the best in the world start dreading the machinery they're supposed to elevate, the sport's future stops feeling like sport at all. That cockpit chaos leads naturally to a bigger question. Who actually wins from this revolution? Because if the drivers lose control, someone else must be gaining it. And that's where the politics and money behind 2026 come roaring in. Now we get to the part the FIA doesn't want shouted too loudly, the group that actually benefits from this so-called revolution. Surprise, it's not the teams scrapping for points or the drivers cracking under energy graphs. It's the manufacturers and marketing departments who treat the rulebook like a business plan. Look at the timing. Two new American heavyweights, Ford and Cadillac, both coincidentally lined up to join right when the regulations shift to half-electric architecture. That's not luck, that's alignment. The FIA can sell its sustainability dream, and American car giants, whose road divisions already live and breathe electrification, suddenly become the poster children for Formula One's future. Win-win for PR, lose-lose for racing. Ford played the sneaky card. Instead of pouring billions into a standalone team, they latched onto Red Bull, the single most dominant operation on the grid. The deal is dressed up as innovation partnership, but really it's exposure without accountability. Ford gets its badge on a front-running car, immediate global visibility, and a technical handshake that gives them credibility in EV development. If it goes sideways, Red Bull takes the flak. If it wins, Detroit gets the halo. Low risk, high return, full marketing jackpot. Cadillac pulled the opposite move, a full constructor entry with Ferrari power units at first, before launching their own. Riskier, yes, but rich in future control. They're essentially buying knowledge, learn the regulations, harvest data, then pivot to independence by the decade's end. Sounds admirable until you realize it's being made possible because the rulebook favors manufacturers who already specialize in electric tech. The more hybrid complexity you add, the more you lock out smaller outfits without factory resources. That's the quiet corruption baked into 2026. Sustainability becomes a toll booth. Big brands pay their way in, smaller teams get squeezed out. The FIA talks about leveling the field, yet the budget cap's already jumping from $135 million to $215 million, just to make the new hardware viable. That's a 59% increase, not a gentle tweak. What kind of cost control triples your R&D expenses and then pats itself on the back for discipline? This is where the hypocrisy bites. They claim these cars will reduce environmental impact. Meanwhile, the new batteries require lithium, nickel, and copper, mined in horrendous conditions, shipped across continents and replaced frequently thanks to intense charge cycles. So yes, the race fuel will be synthetic and carbon neutral, but the logistics will be a resource nightmare. For every ton of emissions saved on track, there's another multiplied getting components to the track. Nobody mentions that in the glossy presentations. The FIA's narrative is clear. Align with modern road car trends, stay relevant, attract fresh manufacturers. But that's corporate spin dressed in carbon fiber. F1's influence on road cars has always been symbolic, not literal. You don't build a family hatchback from Aero maps, you sell aspiration through emotion. By chasing moral credibility, the sport hands over control to businesses whose main goal is marketing ROI, not wheel-to-wheel racing. This shift creates a new hierarchy. Teams with direct manufacturer backing thrive because they can treat F1 as an R&D department. Private outfits without that support face extinction or forced partnerships. You're left with two kinds of competitors: corporate labs running prototypes and midfield survivors fighting to stay solvent. Once this happens, performance diversity dies, the grid becomes a billboard contest, and let's not ignore the politics. The FIA gets to brag about attracting American investment, broadening global appeal, and future-proofing the sport. Meanwhile, the real agenda is financial security. More manufacturers mean more marketing budgets, more event sponsors, more talking points for sustainability summits. Nobody's arguing that money keeps the circus alive. But 2026 looks less like a technical overhaul and more like a brand merger. Essentially, the FIA traded purity for publicity. They aligned the sport with the automotive zeitgeist: electrification, environmental awareness, transatlantic reach. On paper, it's modernization. In practice, it's gentrification. F1 used to represent rebellion, pushing machines past sensibility. Now it represents compliance, polishing machines until they look socially acceptable. For Ford, Cadillac, and any corporation jumping on board, 2026 is a golden ticket. Their engineers get playgrounds funded by global TV rights. Their marketers get headlines about sustainability leadership. The FIA gets validation for its eco-pivot. And the fans? We get a product shaped by quarterly reports instead of passion. That's why the rule changes feel engineered less for fairness and more for franchising. But when everything becomes brand-friendly, something else gets lost: character. Which takes us straight to the heart of the matter: what all this progress is doing to the soul of Formula One itself. If you fell in love with F1 during the eras of screaming engines and unpredictable heroes, what's coming feels almost unrecognizable. This sport was never meant to be sterile or smartly efficient. It was meant to flirt with danger, to push human ability against physics. It was shrieking engines, smell of fuel, bravery on display. You didn't need a sustainability chart to feel alive. The sound did that for you. Now picture 2026. Half the power whispers instead of roars. Active Aero smooths out the chaos that once tested courage. Every lap is diced into algorithmic sequences, telling the driver when to harvest, when to deploy, when to chill. It looks perfect in simulation, but perfection kills thrill. The edges get shaved off, the drama gets tidied, and suddenly the spectacle feels sedated. You can already sense how the FIA will spin it: closer racing, technological showcase, eco-leadership. But emotionally, it's empty calories. When cars glide quietly past grandstands, nobody feels goosebumps from sustainability. They feel absence. That mechanical roar that once unified fans across generations will be gone, buried under a hum of electric efficiency. The justification is always evolution, but this isn't growth. It's automation of passion. The cars no longer fight circuits. They comply with them. Every risk that once required instinct is now pre-approved by data. The FIA seems proud of how controllable everything's becoming, but control isn't why people watch. They watch for defiance, for the sense that something might go wrong and brilliance might save it. We've seen this movie before. In 2014, the hybrid era began, and for nearly a decade, one team's head start collapsed the spectacle. Races looked predictable because technical regulation gaps take years to close. 2026 is shaping up to repeat that script, but with even higher costs and less audible drama. The difference now is the emotional fallout. Back then, people complained about sound. Now they'll complain about soul. The consequences stretch beyond the paddock. Fans drifting to endurance racing or IndyCar won't be chasing louder engines. They'll be chasing authenticity. They'll crave something that still feels human, where mistakes happen and instinct decides outcomes. F1 risks becoming the world's cleanest, cleverest, and most forgettable motorsport. Reliability will also take a hit at first. Complex hybrids always break early. Software glitches, overheating batteries, mistimed aero switches. Add budget cap inflation and the early seasons could mirror 2014. Handful of finishers, one dominant team, and diminishing patience from a fan base promised spectacle. When the spectacle collapses under spreadsheets, trust evaporates fast. Eventually, the backlash will come. As soon as the audience senses scripted competition, pressure builds. Sponsors panic, attention drifts, and the FIA backpedals. Expect rule revisions before 2028. Maybe simplified Aero, maybe relaxed energy limits. But by then, the damage to Formula One's credibility could be irreversible. Rebuild the heart too many times, and it stops sounding genuine. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Relevance is overrated. People don't watch F1 because it matches road car trends. They watch it because it defies them. Nobody wants the pinnacle of motorsport to mirror the school run. Yet the FIA's chase for automotive endorsement has turned rebellion into rehearsal. Those who defend the 2026 project call it necessary evolution. They say without alignment to sustainability, the sport risks extinction. Maybe they're right financially, but spiritually, extinction might already be happening from the inside out. A race can be carbon neutral and still emotionally flat. So as we edge closer to this new era, fans, drivers, even teams should ask themselves what they actually want F1 to represent. Is it a green laboratory for brand politics, or the ultimate test of human courage under impossible speed? If the answer's the latter, the alarm bells should already be deafening. Because what's being handed to us in 2026 may still call itself Formula One, but it won't feel like it. And losing that feeling is the true disaster no rulebook can ever fix. Here's the deal. Formula One's 2026 vision proves that a sport can chase progress so hard, it forgets why people cared in the first place. The FIA keeps reassuring everyone that this is the future: sustainable fuels, cleaner energy, closer racing. But nothing about competition survives when passion gets flattened into policy. Faster on paper doesn't matter if the spectacle feels slower where it counts, in your gut. Because the progress they're selling isn't emotional, it's administrative. It's based on compliance metrics, not goosebumps. Each new regulation is another layer of insulation between driver and danger, between fan and heartbeat. Sustainability is a noble goal, but when it becomes the story rather than the support act, you don't get better racing. You get safer spreadsheets. Remember when F1's slogan was about unleashing the future? Now it's about containing it. Every innovation arrives pre-approved by committees, softened for optics, sanitized for sponsors. The result? Cars that might glide through corners like ghosts, but leave nothing behind. No echo, no imprint, no reason to replay that lap a decade later. And it's not just nostalgia talking. Watch any highlight reel from the old eras and what sticks isn't data. It's defiance. Drivers forcing physics to blink first. Mechanics gambling on setups that could explode or triumph. Raw, unpredictable courage. Strip that away, and F1's transformation into an automated exhibition becomes complete. Technically faultless, emotionally weightless. The FIA's logic follows an uncomfortable pattern. When a sport loses confidence in its artistry, it doubles down on justification. Relevant to road cars, aligned with global responsibility, appealing to new demographics. All fine slogans. None of them explain why hearts race when lights go out. The faster F1 tries to please everyone, the less it resembles what drew anyone in. So what kind of legacy does that leave? Maybe history books will call 2026 the dawn of a greener age, but fans in the stands might remember it as the moment F1 traded its raw for reassurance. When spectacle became sacrifice and the future arrived polished, yet empty. Let me know what you think. Should Formula One chase road car relevance or protect the raw racing DNA that made it legendary? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe if you want more takes that cut through the PR fog. Because the conversation about F1's soul isn't over, and 2026 might be the last chance to save it.